Soundstripe.
Okay, everyone, get ready, because we are diving deep into the world of teamwork today.
Teamwork, but with a twist, right?
Exactly. We're tackling this idea of a workplace where, and this is an interesting one, every job is everybody's job.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Now, before anyone panics and thinks, wait, does this mean I have to do everyone else's work on top of mine?
Right, like suddenly I'm the office superhero.
Ha ha, not quite. It's not about piling on more tasks, but shifting how we see our roles within a team.
Okay, so less about doing everyone else's work and more about changing how we think about our own work and how it fits into the bigger picture.
You got it. Have you ever noticed that, like, when you're expecting guests, your messy kitchen magically cleans itself? Well, last week I was on the receiving end of that mythical cleaning fairy, and let's just say it did not magically end with a sparkling sink. Turns out, assuming the responsibility fairy will wave their magic wand at work leads to even bigger messes. That's why we're diving into the difference between assuming somebody will take care of it and fostering a real every job is everybody's job environment. You've given us a really interesting mix to unpack here, from that relatable story about a task nobody did to some compelling arguments for why shared responsibility isn't just idealistic, it actually works.
What's fascinating about this is that it's not just about, who takes out the trash.
Yeah.
It gets at something really common in teams. The idea of diffusion of responsibility.
Oh, I've definitely been guilty of that. It's like when you're in a meeting and nobody wants to volunteer for the follow-up action items.
Exactly. It's a classic social phenomenon. When we're part of a group, we often feel less individually responsible for taking action. We assume someone else will step up, which ironically often means nobody does.
And that's exactly where the story you sent comes in. It illustrates this dilemma perfectly. Shall we dive in?
Let's hear it. I'm always up for a good workplace parable.
Okay, so it starts with this. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it.
Simple, but I can already see where this is going.
Right. It's like a recipe for disaster, but we all recognize those ingredients.
And of course, anybody could have done it, but nobody did it.
Oh, the blame game is about to commence.
Oh, absolutely.
Hi?
But what's interesting here isn't just the inaction, it's how that inaction impacts everyone. The story continues. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job.
Ugh. That feeling of frustration when you realize a task has fallen through the cracks and now it's suddenly a crisis is too relatable. But instead of just shaking our heads at this fictional team, let's break down what went wrong. Why is this everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody scenario so common in the first place?
Well, think about it this way. Our brains are hardwired to conserve energy. When we're unsure if something is our direct responsibility, it's easier to justify inaction. That's amplified in group settings, where we can easily convince ourselves someone else is more capable or likely to step in.
It's like that old bystander effect, right? The more people who witness a problem, the less likely anyone is to actually help.
Exactly. We assume someone else will take the lead call for help, or that it's somehow not our place to intervene. This translates directly to the workplace. Without clear roles, expectations, and communication, that diffusion effect kicks in, and important tasks can easily get overlooked.
And that's where this idea of every job is everybody's job comes in as a potential solution, right? But before we jump into that, I'm curious to hear how you see that nobody impacting things beyond just the immediate task at hand.
Well, it's like a domino effect. When nobody handles that one task, it can disrupt workflows, create bottlenecks, and ultimately impact the entire team's ability to achieve its goals. Plus, let's not forget the hit to team morale. That feeling of frustration and resentment when people feel like they're constantly left holding the bag. That's a recipe for disengagement and conflict.
It's amazing how one little word, nobody, can encapsulate so much workplace dysfunction. But luckily, our sources don't leave us stranded in a sea of nobody. They offer a compelling alternative with this idea of a shared responsibility model where every job is everybody's job.
And you know what's interesting? Because at first glance, that phrase could almost sound intimidating, right? Like, am I suddenly responsible for everything happening at the company?
It's a completely understandable reaction. But the sources we're looking at today emphasize that every job is everybody's job, isn't about adding a million tasks to everyone's plates. It's about shifting the mindset from "that's not my job" to a more collective approach where everyone understands how their work contributes to the bigger picture and feels empowered to contribute beyond their narrowly defined roles.
So it's not about erasing job descriptions altogether. It's more about acknowledging that those lines are often more fluid than we think, and sometimes stepping outside those lines a little is what helps the entire team succeed.
Exactly. And our Smart Select sources actually lay out some really concrete ways to bring this collaborative approach to life. They talk about it not just as some nice sounding philosophy, but as a model with practical steps.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are some of the core ingredients of this approach? How do we move from nobody to everybody in a way that actually works?
Well, it starts with understanding how our individual roles, even if they seem very different on paper, are interconnected.
It's like that old adage, it takes a village. But in this case, it takes a team, each with their own expertise working together to achieve something bigger than any one person could do alone.
Precisely. One of the examples in the Smart Select files uses a restaurant to show this in action. You might think a chef's job is totally separate from the waitstaff's, but what the chef cooks directly impacts what the waitstaff serves and how satisfied the customer is. And the waitstaff, through their interactions with customers, can give the chef invaluable feedback on what's working and what needs tweaking.
It's a two-way street, even though at first glance you might think those are totally separate lanes.
Absolutely. And that kind of mutual understanding and communication is crucial for a shared responsibility model to thrive.
And it goes beyond just information exchange. When everyone sees how the pieces fit together, it creates a shared sense of accountability. It's no longer just about checking off your own to-do list. It's about feeling invested in the team's overall success.
Which, let's be honest, can be incredibly motivating. I know that when I feel like my contributions are valued and directly impact our shared goals, I'm way more engaged and willing to go the extra mile. It's that feeling of we're all in this together that can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key ingredient our sources highlight: open and proactive communication. We need to move away from those siloed situations where people are afraid to ask for help or share information.
Now, hold on. I'm going to ask, what exactly does siloed situations mean in this context? It makes me think of grain, not teamwork.
Right, good catch.
Yeah.
It basically means teams or individuals working in isolation without much interaction or information sharing with other parts of the organization, like those metaphorical silos on a farm, keeping everything separate.
And in a workplace, those silos can be real productivity killers. You might have teams duplicating efforts, missing out on crucial information, or just feeling like they're stuck on an island. But in a shared responsibility model, transparency and collaboration are key.
It's about creating a culture where it's safe to speak up, ask for help, and share both successes and challenges. Because, let's face it, nobody has all the answers all the time.
Exactly. One of the Smart Select sources uses the example of a marketing team to illustrate this. Picture this. A huge deadline is looming, and one team member is drowning in work. In a traditional setting, they might suffer in silence, afraid to admit they need help. But in a collaborative environment, their teammates would recognize the shared stake in meeting that deadline. They'd step in to offer support, whether by brainstorming solutions, redistributing some of the workload, or simply lending an empathetic ear.
And that kind of proactive support doesn't just prevent burnout. It often leads to more creative problem solving and a stronger sense of camaraderie. It's much easier to celebrate successes together when you've also navigated challenges as a team.
You're hitting on something really important here. Our sources aren't just arguing for shared responsibility as a way to get things done more efficiently, though that's certainly a benefit. They're highlighting how this approach can transform the entire work experience.
We're talking about increased job satisfaction, greater innovation, and a more resilient and adaptable workforce. And when people feel valued and empowered to contribute their unique strengths, it creates a powerful sense of shared purpose.
Which at the end of the day benefits everyone from the individual employee all the way up to the organization as a whole. It's about moving beyond the limitations of "that's not my job" and embracing the possibilities that emerge when we approach challenges and goals as a collective.
I love that.
So for our listeners who've been on this deep dive with us, what's one thing they can take away from all of this?
If you remember just one thing from our conversation today, let it be this. Fostering a sense of shared responsibility in the workplace isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about shifting your perspective to see how your work contributes to the bigger picture and recognizing that we can achieve extraordinary things when we work together towards a common goal.
And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire that mythical kitchen cleaning fairy to become a reality in your own home. Now that's a deep dive I can get behind.